So the title of the presentation is Community Supported Stewardship Agriculture, Reimagining Our Economy. We are pleased to have Anna Jones-Crabtree and Doug Crabtree joining us for the 2022 conference. So Anna is a Donella Meadows Leadership Fellow and a recipient of the White House Greening Government Sustainability Hero Award. She holds a PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering with a minor in Sustainable Systems from Georgia Institute of Technology. Given the realities of farming, Anna is still has an off-farm job with the USDA Forest Service, and after serving decades fostering more sustainable operations, she is now currently serving as a Director for Data Governance for the Northern Region. And Doug serves as board member of the Organic Trade Association and is a past chair of the Montana Organic Association. He also manages crop contracts for the Montana Organic Producers Cooperative and holds a BSc in Agriculture Economics from Purdue University and an MSc in Agronomy from South Dakota State University. So with that, I welcome you both. Thank you for being here.
Oh, good. It's working. Well, this is more green than I think I've seen in 2 years, maybe. Hi.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Just wanted to say what an honor it is for us to be able to address you all. Anna and I always feel like we bring home more than we bring to these gatherings with our northern neighbors. I have taken on myself, when I have an opportunity in recent years with some of the upheaval we have in our politics in the United States, to suggest we would welcome, because we farm right on the border, as you can see, and we'd like to start a movement for annexation of our part of Hill County into Saskatchewan so that we could be a little more civilized.
All right. With that, Doug and I are excited to be here. I said, I think we've been here before, but man, it sure looks different after 4 years. And it's nice to be back with a bunch of people, and that's coming from a gal that has to drive 40 minutes to go to the grocery store. So with that, let's just jump in and tell you a little bit about our farming system and our journey as first-generation farmers. We started in 2009, bought land off the open market, and moved to a place that we didn't grow up in. And we've come to realize that there's a lot that comes beyond just being organic. So we're going to tag team, and thanks for being on the journey with us. Go, Doug.
Yeah, thanks. We started the farm in 2009, bought a couple sections, and have been lucky enough to expand from there. And we both worked off farm for the first few years, and over the years the farm has become a full-time endeavor for me, and then some. We have quite a team, though it is a changing team. Part of our training and mentorship efforts, we always have new faces. But really, when we agreed to speak here early last year, we were coming off what we thought at that time was a very difficult year, and very little rain, not nearly enough production. But we're very hopeful that this would be a recovery year. And instead, we sort of doubled down on drought, and recently did the math and realized we produced less than we seeded, and overall 9% of our average production in 2022. So I want to apologize ahead of time if any of what I have to say is not overly positive, but that's the place we're coming from. 21 and 2022 were, by the records I study, the driest years ever recorded in our part of Montana, and we're still living for another day and hopeful going forward, but we're in some difficult times. So that colors what we have to
Well,
share.
and all that said, I think part of what we want to share is some thinking about organic. And we started with organic because we deeply believed in that from an agronomic perspective. We also thought that it had better social and financial outcomes. And what we're seeing is as we try and survive on a planet with a changing climate, that we all, as organic producers, have to push for some greater systems change beyond just the agronomics. So with that, go ahead, Doug.
Guess I went too far.
You're nervous.
Yeah, I always like to start. I believe production grows out of one's philosophy, and I'm not going to read through them, but you can see on the screen some of the basic tenets that we hold dear, and that we try to both activate in our farming and also to share with others. Pretty basic concepts, really. So that's what colors how we farm and why.
So we've been really viewed ourselves as doing the best we can from land stewardship. We have a really complex system, and you can see that we look really differently from the sky. Doug likes to say we're in a land of wheat and not wheat. So you can see our diversity of strips, farming and crop strips, and lots of other things. So this is from the sky. Go ahead, the next slide, Doug. Here's a little bit closer, and there's, I don't know, I didn't convert this to hectares, sorry, but there's 18 million acres of cropland in Montana, and less than 1% of that's organic. I am assuming those are pretty similar statistics for Canada.
No, they're way ahead of us. We really appreciate being here, where I think it's roughly 10 times the acres and number of farms in Saskatchewan.
Thus the annexation.
Exactly.
Go ahead. So here's what these look like a little bit closer, and this is the halcyon days of, 2020.
The last time it rained.
So our pollinator strips, we have over 400 acres of these kinds of strips that we've been seeding to handle wind erosion and native pollinator habitat. So we're pretty proud of this diversity across the landscape, as well as temporal diversity with our cropping system.
So as we said, there are a lot of concepts that we hold dear, but really at the base of that pyramid of belief is diversity. And we try to exercise diversity in all ways we can, but one of them is what we seed onto the land. This is just a pie chart showing the crops that we seeded in 2022. The conservation, those are rangeland and intentionally seeded habitat areas around the farm. And we have roughly 18% this past year was in various forms of cover crops, green manures and grazing. And then I think it was 18 crops that we seeded with the intention of harvest. Did not get to harvest all of those, but that's the year it was.
So much like probably many of you, we do a lot of things that don't necessarily have a payback in that particular year. It's investment in the long run and the care of our soil and our relationship with the land. And so I think this can probably resonate with all of you. Growing food integrated with land care takes effort. We also adopted cows the last couple years. We have a young gentleman on our operation that's incubating a grazing business because we thought we needed to take this to the next level. Did you want to talk more about the cows?
Sure. Yeah. One of the things, this seems like a simple concept, but we've come to realize that while growing crops organically and growing livestock organically are both really powerful ideas on their own, if we can put those two together and put them together on the same land, the synergies are really, the 1 + 1 = 3 or 4. And, we're still figuring out how to do that in practice and at full scale, but so far we're very encouraged that one of the strategies that will allow us to survive and hopefully thrive through these challenging climate and weather circumstances is by much more fully integrating livestock into the cropping system and using grazing as an integral part of the agronomy.
So with that, you'll get to see a lot of pictures of Highlanders coming up instead of crops. Although this picture on the top here, well, it's not back here, but the picture on the top of the young guy, that's Paul, who's doing the integrated grazing, and that was 2021, which is our hemp crop, which was on transition land, along with a turnip in one of our cover crops. So the hemp it looked stellar, but it didn't do very stellar. But it was crazy to see these tall growing things, kind of like a historic. It must be a historic forest or prehistoric forest. But doing all the work that we and many of you do, it's not simple. It takes people. They are all on payroll. They all have needs. They're humans, and it takes a lot of critters too to do this work. It also takes patience.
I'm not sure what you
This was
want
your
me to
slide.
say for that one.
It's okay. It takes patience. Things don't happen overnight, right? Nature doesn't work on the same processes and cycles that sometimes we as humans or our human-created systems do. This is a picture from 2018. We hosted a pollinator habitat tour, and we went and we looked at some of our strips. I said interviewed, because we kind of do that with these strips. It's like, hey, how's it going out there? And when you look deeply, there were species that are native to our place that were coming up that we did not put in our native seed mix. Super crazy and amazing.
Yeah, that was so heartening. You like to see the things that you envision come to fruition, and this idea that diversity can beget diversity, that if we seeded a few native species, then 5 years later or something doing the survey, there are things there that we didn't seed that have come back because of the habitat created.
It's really comes to be your power of observation. I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago, and somebody asked me what keeps you going after you have all the discussions about drought and the challenges with the labor and the market. And I said, well, here's one story. I walked down one of our strips checking the fence for the Highlander cows, and in this little divot, there was just enough water that the echinacea that I know was in our seed mix that I'd never seen before was actually blooming. It was so crazy, and it just made my day. Go ahead, Doug. The other thing that it takes to do this work is it takes capital, right? I was so intrigued with Lyndon this morning. Like, not having money wasn't part of their culture. Gosh, what does that look like? We can't run our business without capital, right? So Doug and I have been doing a lot of reflecting on how much does it cost us per acre. We are a totally low, no input farm, and yet it still takes money to pay people, to buy fuel, to repair things. I'm sure this all resonates. And if we want to scale and take on more acres in transition, which is what we've been trying to do, who knows that we would have started in 2009 and now have the privilege of managing over 12,000 acres. Pretty crazy. But with that comes some risk, with the hope of some reward.
So one of the conflicts between our dominant social and economic system and the natural system that we are part of and that we seek to support and emulate is the time scale. And in building soil, that is a lifetime endeavor, and often the results don't show up for a couple rotation cycles at least, even if you do the right things and have some cooperation. And yet, we are asked in business terms to pay all the bills and the interest and everything in an annual and sometimes multi-annual cycle. And I think that's part of the conflict we're trying to find ways to bridge.
So stewardship happens no matter how little it rains. We still seeded close to 3,000 acres of cover crop. We grazed cows. Those are things that didn't necessarily have income. And, we don't need to go a deep dive on the statistics here. I'm sure you all have experienced some of this as well. rising interest rates, fuel surcharges, and then this is a picture from our farm tour in early June of 2021. We were on track to have the best year ever. The crew was amazing. Things got in timely. Stuff looked awesome for the farm tour. How often does that happen, right? and then this is what things looked like by mid-July. At least in 2021, we had some chickling veg to terminate. This is the terminated cover crop. But it was so incredible how fast we went from awesome growing conditions to 100-degree temperatures and 50-mile-an-hour winds. And if you're a lentil, you can't do what you need to do in that environment. So everyone's saying, hey, let's check out these carbon markets. Let's check out these ecosystem service markets. We said that's got to be part of what's going to help us, right? Because we're still doing the stewardship. We're still trying our best to build soil and do the things that we say are all important in terms of taking care of the water cycle, clean air, all of those things, employing people. And yet, when we tried to do that, we've been told that we're too complex to model. I kind of get it, you got to put it in the industrial system and they didn't even have crops that we grew in the system when they modeled. So that was a super disappointing experience.
I don't remember how long ago it was. Several years, we submitted data on our cropping system to a nonprofit that was going to put us through what's called the NORI model, which is a system to model carbon sequestration. And we waited and waited, we're hoping to see some results. And finally, the person we're working with there wrote us back and said, had to apologize that your system broke the model.
So
haven't learned anything yet.
That's a few years ago. We're working with another startup that I think is definitely more of the frame of mind around what we're trying to do. But we also have this issue of additionality in our collective community here, is that we've adopted a lot of things, right? So you only get credit if you adopt new stuff, which doesn't necessarily jive with building soil over the long run. So, here, just to add insult to injury, I don't know, I'd love to see how many of you have gotten letters like this. Like we just got this last week, hey, we're really sorry to tell you this, but the prime rate index increased, and we took out a loan for seed because last year we had actually had the seed, or the buyer buy the seed for us and said, we'll pay you out of the crop. And they're like, oh, we can't do that this year. We're serving as your bank. And I'm like, that's exactly the reason I want you to do it. But so we took out this other loan just to cover the seed, and then we get this rate notice. And then it's like, we're thankful for the opportunity. Yeah, of course you're thankful for the opportunity. You get paid no matter what happens, right? So I've been thinking about this system a lot, and where do we get to push back, or who do we push this off to? Go ahead. So I started thinking about this, like what would happen if we all started writing letters like this, like, hello, Mother Nature, I'm super sorry, but our interest rates have gone up, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity to service your pollinators and your soil microbes, but I can't do this anymore. Like, what do we say? Like, we as producers don't have somebody else to send this impact to. And reach out to our farm accounting team, as if I even have a farm accounting team. I think you're looking at us. All right, yeah. So anyway, this all says, do you want to take this?
No, I just wanted to say a couple things. We've been struggling and really asking ourselves some fundamental questions of, are we doing the right things? Are we doing it in the right place? What can we do more or differently? And I'm sure some of in the audience will think the way that I do. I said, okay, well, we've just got to double down. We'll lease some more land. We'll do more with the equipment we have. We'll add more crops, continue to grow, because we're obviously doing the right thing. So we just need to do it harder and more. And the brilliance in this relationship lies to my right, and Anna one day said, maybe we need to think harder, and there could be a different way. And we had been talking for years about how much we admire the CSA model, community supported agriculture, and how growers, fruit and vegetable, smaller scale, such as Anna's sister, have these farms where they're able to derive income from their customers at the outset of the season, avoid the need to borrow capital, and then that is paid back through a portion of the crop, whatever there is. And to me, that is just absolutely the just way that things should be done. Why is it that a bank or a seed company or a equipment manufacturer gets paid whether there's production or not? They should all exist on a portion just like we do, although sometimes our portion is negative. But that should be, we need to change that. And Anna came up with this brilliant idea, I think, that is starting to get us there.
So part of this presentation, we said, man, we can't just be negative. We have to talk about what's possible. Because if we can envision collectively as a community what's possible, then it doesn't have to be so mission impossible, and we can help each other. And unfortunately, I don't have a tech department, so I was not able to put the music in with this on the slideshow.
And I have no
Doug
talent.
is not the tech department, I'll tell you that. So, I don't know, last February, a year ago, I took this class. I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning because it was from Switzerland with the Biodynamic Federation, and they were talking about this idea called associative economics. Really, like, how do we actually have an economic system that's more reciprocal? We acknowledge there's give and we acknowledge there's take, and it's really about all of us associating together to support the whole system as a whole versus each one individual actor operating as what they need in their own stovepipe. So this was one of the slides from some of that learning that I did in the class. And so when you start thinking about the supply chain, we have farmers, producers, wholesalers, retailers, right? Like, we as farmers are the ones that add the most value. We're the ones that are working with nature. We have the most labor associated with anybody else in that supply line. And then there's some difference in what are the costs. We can have more costs because we have fuel and things, and some of that's more variable. And what we buy is very little. So we don't buy things from other people very much. But that's different. Those proportions are different as you move up the chain. And so part of the conversation was, wow, are farmers the ones that are really adding the most value because we're the ones that are working most with the natural system? So here's another slide, which is rather than a supply chain, and the colors, this is a table. Think about this as a table, and we're all sitting at a round table. And the colors are the other members of the supply chain, and then over here on the left is the cosmos. That's the farmer. We're taking things from the planet. We're working with nature, and we're trying to say, how do we actually mold this into something that everybody else can use and be healthy and have a healthy environment? And so their idea is and they've done this in several different case studies where they get these parties together at the table and they really talk about what do each one of us need to survive and then what do each one of us need to thrive. So it becomes a supply circle where there's returning, not just a one-way extractive supply chain. Pretty fascinating. As I've done some more reading around economics, there's this awesome economist called Hazel Henderson. I think she passed away this year. But her work was back in the 80s, and she came up with this layer cake model about our economic system. So look what's on the top. What's on the top is our cash economy, right? Those are the things that we're all thinking about. We spend all this energy on our cash economy, and yet, the thing that underlies that entire cake at the very bottom is our social systems and then our natural systems. So if we don't have functioning natural systems, nothing else we do matters on the top of the cake, right? Yet how often in our day-to-day lives do we actually stop and think about this? I think as organic farmers, we probably do when we're out looking at our fields and we're trying to do the right thing with nature, but we're in this tension between the system that we exist in and the system that we're trying to build and create that can bring into being. Another cool economic model is this idea of donut economics. So I find it kind of fascinating that all the economic models that I'm drawn to mostly are women economists and mostly have something to do with food. I don't know what that what
And
that
desserts
means.
even.
Desserts, yeah, right? So Kate Raworth, check out her Donut Economics book, but there's also this other great site in the UK where they're actually taking her model of this donut, which is the outside of the donut is our ecological ceiling. If we overshoot that with climate change or water consumption, like it's really hard to get us back in that safe space of the donut. In the middle of the donut are all of our social systems. Like how well are our people doing? Do they have food and water and energy and health care? What does that look like? And you can get on these sites and look up every country and compare. And I tried to do a slide with Canada and the US, and we looked really pretty similar, which was fascinating. So instead, I just took the slides, the world map, and the one on top is actually our biophysical systems. And the lighter color is where we are worse off in really overshooting our biophysical systems. The chart on the bottom, the world map on the bottom, is our social systems, and what's lighter is where it's worse again. So for like the United States, we're doing really well in some level of measure around our social systems and trying to learn how to take care of each other. We're not doing so well in terms of our overshoot of our biophysical systems. So just another big picture model to think about and start finding some language to say, how do we as organic farmers fit into this? What is our role in those ecological ceilings?
So we're essentially mortgaging our ecology to support an unsustainable lifestyle.
Yeah. So what happens if we share? There's examples of nature sharing all over. I bet all of you see them on your farms every day if you start looking for it. We've had this idea, and I think in our heads, collectively as a society, that says nature's super competitive, watch out for the bears and the sharks. And actually, if you start looking a little closer, there's an awful lot of sharing, an awful lot of reciprocal give and take. And you only take what you need. You don't take anything more.
It looks like that calf has that same question.
So another person I've been inspired by is Robin Wall Kimmerer, author of Braiding Sweetgrass. And this is an essay that you can Google and read. It's called The Service Berry, where she talks a lot about the gift economy. It was just so moving to have Lyndon open our conference today, because this is very similar to what Robin Wall Kimmerer has been talking about, which is our economic unit then becomes we rather than I. What are we doing on our farms? It's we. We are working together with natural systems. We are working together with a team. It's not I am doing this myself.
So another part of this concept is just trying to think if we are actually an agriculture, part of a larger cultural movement, or if we're trending more to agribusiness. And I know for many of us, I'll say for myself, one of the reasons that we are organic and chose to be part of this community was we thought it was a more sane system that incorporated not only more sound economics, but definitely more sound agronomic and social aspects that need to be part of agriculture. And part of the challenge we're facing is it feels like as our movement or our sector or our, I cringe at the word industry, grows, we're losing some of that, frankly. And we're losing the, sit down at one of these tables, shake hands with your buyer, processor, food company, partner, and come to an arrangement, as we're discussing, that works, lets both parties thrive. And more, what I'm seeing in the marketplace are some of the same names that we couldn't do business with when we were not organic are now organic buyers all of a sudden, and trying to to make the organic system function along the same rules and terms that non-organic does. So I just think that's a question we all need to ask ourselves is are we practicing culture or are we merely practicing business?
Well, it starts to feel like it's death by 1,000 scorecards, right? Like, hey, fill out this new thing. So we have to push back a bit as a collective association of organic producers and say it's more than a checklist. And we can't be the only ones changing. We have to have the rest of the system change with us and think about some fundamental different ways in engaging. So that led us to say, hey, let's see what we can do to engage a broader community around our farm of support. This is a big experiment. So we launched what we called our CSSA, our Community-Supported Stewardship Agriculture. So for $100, you can help steward the conservation and the work that goes into the service of stewardship for 1 acre of land. And with that, you're going to get not a box of lentils, but you're going to get a really good story and an experience to follow along with us on our farming season and understand deeper what happens. So this is our way of engaging a broader community. Right now, it's been friends and family as our first layer. And I actually have a friend from Denmark who bought a share. It's like, you mean to tell me I can be part of this farm organism that's in Montana? And how big is your farm? Oh my gosh, think about what that compares to my friends here in Denmark. Super amazing way to start having a broader conversation about the impact of each organic farm. Because farms are like beating hearts, right? Like, you all know this. Money flows through, you hire people, you take care of soil and water, and all those things feed our community. And if we aren't taking care of our organic farms, what are we going to have in the future? So we have to learn how to decouple the service, the work that we're doing, from the income stream of annual production. And there's a lot of conversation going on about, well, won't the carbon market help do this for you? And my question back is, why is it we have enough resources embedded in this larger system to stand up a whole nother industry that's going to have people that are going to get paid no matter what happens with climate change? How about we give that money in a way that goes direct back to the farmers that are doing the work? What do you get when you buy a carbon credit and you get on an airplane? Oh, you might get a certificate, right? So this isn't that different, except that it's a direct relationship with a farm. And we've had a farm team member the last 2 years be with us who's actually a musician. So if you sign up this year, you're going to, now, before the end of December, you'll get the exclusive artist piece to the CSSA.
I think one other thing that it was kind of an aha moment to me is it's easy when we're on the farm to lose sight of this, but as practicing active commercial farms that make our living from the land, we're less than 1% of the population. And when you have an opportunity to travel to larger metropolitan areas, you know, Saskatoon, Washington, D.C., wherever in our countries, it becomes much more obvious that we're not even a rounding error in the census. We don't even, farms don't get a mention in the census because there aren't enough of us to be statistically significant. Point of that diatribe is there's a tremendous amount of wealth that is not at all connected to farms or agriculture, at least in their minds, and a significant portion of that 99% of the population has concerns and thoughts and are willing and eager to share some of their wealth for what they see as beneficial purposes. And so we're trying to provide a way that they can do that.
Yeah, so all that said, this may not be the solution, but it's something we're trying. And we're also, the second tier is we're working with other companies, some in our supply chain, some not, to say, hey, you have ESG goals to meet. What if you think about it differently? Is there a way that we can engage? So stay tuned. We'll see. We launched in June, and we've sold 1,000 acres. But if we can sell more this way, man, that could eliminate our need to actually have operating capital. So that's one thing we're trying. A few other things that we're trying. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, this is more just some things over the years that we have attempted to do in cooperation with buyers and other folks in our circle. But, we don't like to sell a volume of or a quantity of bushels of a crop. We try to sell our acres. So we'll sign a contract, and some call that the act of God clause that gets at that, but 1,000 acres of wheat rather than 20,000 bushels. I'm being optimistic again. But we've also negotiated contracts where we have a floor and a ceiling on the revenue. That means no matter how good the crop is, the buyer will not pay any more than X dollars total or X dollars per acre. Also, no matter how poor the crop is or how little there is to deliver, we'll be guaranteed a floor of revenue. And then we live in between. And thereby the farm gets to survive, the processor or buyer has a limit to their exposure, and in my view, that's better for everyone. We've also, one other thing I'll highlight, that we deal in a lot of specialty crops, and oftentimes the buyer is either the provider of the seed or they specify what that seed should be. I'm sure all of you have experienced those kind of arrangements. And I always thought it was awkward, wrong, ridiculous that a company would say, in order to grow this, you have to buy this seed, and we want your money up front. And so I said, okay, we'll grow this for you. You provide the seed. If you need to, pay us less at the end, but share that risk. And so those are just 3 contract ideas that we've worked on. There are some other minor things, but the idea is in all things, let's meet together, be honest about our needs and capacities, and find a way that works on both sides in a cooperative rather than a competitive model.
Well, I think it'd be really fun to hear what else are all of you dreaming of. Like if you could write your perfect buyer contract as a farmer, what does that look like? And I think sometimes we allow ourselves to get really constrained in the system that we're in, and we think we can't possibly change it. And I want us to think more about what else could we dream of. Like, let's work on this quality spec issue, right? Like, I'm under variable growing conditions, and what responsibility does a buyer have to me if, okay, suddenly things don't meet those conditions because of your industrial processing facility? What can we do to work together so we actually still all stay in business? Go ahead. So a couple other things that we've also been trying with people in our network is finding other ways of financing. You know, we left the regular bank system long ago because they also told us, like, you guys are too complex. We don't fit into your computer model. So we have a landowner that actually put a loan up, low-interest loan up for one of our employees so he could build his tiny house. Guess what? That's a farm team member that's super valued that now has equity in his own house. Unfortunately, Ben is deciding his family pull to Massachusetts is so great, he's moving next year, or in December.
And taking the house.
But he's taking his house with him, right? So he had something. So the farmer that he's going to be working for in Maine is super jazzed because Ben already has his housing, and he has something on his balance sheet now. How else could we replicate that? So by the way, we're looking for a mechanic if anyone knows one. And I have a really beautiful tiny house that they could live in. We also worked with another investor who's part of a company that owns land that we lease from. And he's like, hey, what can I do to help you up your soil building? Well, he bought a tractor, a compost turner, and a side dump trailer for us so we could start our composting operation 2 years ago. And it's not just that he funded that, he funded it at low interest, and we were able to put in that contract clauses that said if we have a really bad year of production, we're going to pay only interest. But if we also find a way to get carbon credits or something that's directly related as income because we're now composting, we're going to share in that. The last example I'll give you is our fuel tanks. So we started from scratch. We're first-generation farmers. I remember the days when we were hauling around the 200-gallon tank of fuel in the back of our truck. We're like, we got to do something about this because the price of fuel versus buying it in bulk versus just regular was a huge difference. So we took a model from the solar industry And we had another landowner say, I'll fund your fuel tanks, and your payment each year will be the calculated difference between what you would have paid if you had not bought that wholesale. So we keep track of the fuel amount that we use, and that's been a really great other model for us, so sharing risk. So I guess my point in all of this, and I think Doug would say this too, is we don't have time to wait around until we get the science right on how are we going to measure and verify carbon in soil. And it's so much more than just that, right? It's not just about the carbon in the soil. Go ahead. It's about giving voice to what actually is possible. What can Mother Nature actually provide? And she has differences in what is doable given what we've done to the planet. And I think we also have to create conditions that so many, many more of us can join in this work, right? Why is it that it's easier to go get a job measuring and verifying carbon than it is to actually get a job on a farm? It's because you're not sure of any stable income. You're not sure of what you can do to build your own equity in life. So we need to rethink that system.
Yeah, the young man standing beside me there, Joel, he was what we call a farm camper for a number of years, as he entered high school, that age. And we had hoped he would come back again next summer, and he didn't. And when we had some conversation, he said, well, I'm not sure which of these are the bigger factor, but he said, I can make more money working at Subway, I think it was, and so we can't compete with fast food. And also, there are more girls in Missoula than 40 miles north of Havre. So I'm not sure how we address either of those problems, but we're going to try them first at least.
Well, Doug was pretty creative. He told Joel, he's like, hey, you know what they do in baseball? They sign like 20-year $1 million contracts. Hey, Joel, how about 20-year $1 million contracts? We'll pay for you to go to school at MSU Northern Havre and get your mechanic degree, and then come work for us. We'll give you a 20-year contract.
He hasn't signed it
He
yet.
hasn't signed yet. He said, I'll have to talk to my parents. The other thing I think we can all do is make things more transparent. Somehow in our culture, we don't talk about money. We don't talk about what everybody's income is. It's kind of taboo, right? And I'm not saying lay out your balance sheet on a T-shirt, but I do say, or your profit and loss statement, I do say I think we need to be a little bit more vocal as farmers about what is actually working and what isn't working for us. This is USDA statistics from the United States. I didn't have a chance to pull up what might be happening in Canada, but our median farm income is negative. Farmers have been paying for the privilege to farm for years, and it's so challenging that USDA feels like they have to actually list the off-farm income here to make the graph look better, I guess, but anyway.
Yeah, this is a chart that's been repeated for decades by the USDA, and the bottom line is farms never make any money, and oftentimes the off-farm income is higher than the net family income, so that's saying that people that have paying jobs, like my spouse, help us subsidize farming year after year after year. And there's another chart that's very similar that shows the subsidies provided to agriculture versus the net and total farm income. And that subsidy is always higher than the net. So we're losing money and we're essentially working for the government. And then generally we have to have people, some part of the team, have government jobs to be able to afford to continue farming.
Which I'm happy to do on a level, because I know I'm subsidizing the bottom layer of the cake, which is important to me. And I guess the last thing I'd say is really think about working from a place of gratitude. It was a tough year this year. Our farm crew has suffered, at least one on our staff, has had severe mental health issues. And I can only go out and look at the sky some nights. I'm sorry. Like, when I cry, some people have told me that's your secret weapon because that's the only moisture you had this year. But I think, we have this privilege of getting to farm. And that is something that not many people have the courage and the gumption and the opportunity to do.
This is just our closing slide. We always go back to one of our heroes, Aldo Leopold, addressed the concept that we are part of a community that includes land and the nature that surrounds it and us. And we use that as a call. We'd like to spend whatever time we have left in discussion, and we invite any and all of you to bring your wisdom to this idea of how can we make a more reasonable, just, and sustainable economy around organic agriculture.
Thanks. Thank you. Getting rid of this. We'll take questions, or Marla, whatever you want.
I was just going to say there's mics in the room, so
And we'll be around for the whole conference too. And we would love feedback on these concepts and these ideas of how else can we collectively talk about some of these challenges and opportunities. Okay, I see, go ahead, Doug.
Testing. Yeah, thanks for coming and speaking. I farm 2 hours west of here, a little 80-acre farm, so a little smaller than what you guys are doing. But your compost, what are you composting? And you're just spreading that and then incorporating it into the soil? And what are you composting as well?
Yeah, for many years, we have just applied feedlot manure. I don't like the term feedlot, but our several neighbors have rather small winter feeding facilities and shared with us that they don't know what to do with this material that builds up over a number of years. So we came to an arrangement where we would take that off their hands and use it as part of our soil building fertility program. And we always knew that it would be better if we could compost it. And then, as Anna shared, the friendly investor that purchased some of that equipment and gave us terms we thought we could afford to put it into place. The idea being that after composting, it's a much more stable material. So we don't feel like we're obligated to incorporate it, whereas with the fresh manure, we felt like that was necessary. So we can spread that on, like if we're using grazing as our green manure termination, then we don't need to use tillage. Therefore, there was not a means of incorporating the manure. So when we do compost, these things all kind of come together, that we're putting a stable material there. It's not going to change or lose any value until the next season, when we'll incorporate it as part of our normal weed control and seed bed preparation. So.
I think Gary's over here. Maybe.
Hi. Yeah, I farm southwest of Saskatoon, and we try to do some of the things that you're trying to do too. Thank you very much for your talk, and particularly the focus on alternate economics. I read somewhere once that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of our economic system, or the alteration of our economic system. So thanks for those thoughts, very much appreciated. And very good luck with alternate systems of taking account of the ecological services that you're providing.
Great. Thank you for those feedback. And please steal our ideas, use them, talk about them. The change isn't gonna happen just because one farm in Montana is saying do it. I mean, we're already crazy enough, so, or people think we are.
Very little that we do is original anyhow.
Yeah. Is that it? Oh.
I guess the question is, I'll just tell you the problem I'm having on my farm, and maybe using cover crops, it's hard to find any information on what certain plants do. Wondering if you have any idea on resources for that. Like being if you want to add a little bit more nitrogen or help release phosphorus or water retention, to say if I add this, what's it gonna do? But doesn't seem to have any of that information. It's always just, I'll add a cover crop. Well, that's pretty variant if there's 10,000 different plants you could plant, how do you narrow that down?
We've found sort of the opposite problem. I think there's too much information, and sometimes it's overwhelming and confusing. Things like the Cover Crop Information Network and Green Cover Seeds has a calculator that allows you to put blends together and addresses what each species might ideally bring. I guess I have, this is just personal, I have found the need to simplify it, and there are those that would say, well, you're not really doing everything you can till you have at least 9 species in every mix. And to me, what we've seen, and we've tried it and experimented, they just outcompete each other, and your legume loses out to the grasses, and you're not getting as much nitrogen as you wanted. And but think about what is your goal. If the cover crop is part of your fertility program and your goal is to grow nitrogen through that miracle that nature gives us, then have a mix or a single species even that is the best nitrogen producer. And that may be different on your farm than it is 10 miles away, so do a few experiments. We grow a lot of chickling vetch. I don't know if any of you know what that is, but very maligned, I would say, cover crop species, but it works great for us because it doesn't use much water and it makes a lot of nitrogen relative to the amount of water it takes. We grow that both as a single species and a seed crop, and also in most of our mixes. But that's just one example. There are places in the rotation where we need a scavenger, so then you look at things like rye or oats that grow vigorously or well with little input and help cycle those nutrients back. So just kind of back up to what is your goal, what do you know will work, what can you experiment to find out that works best or better, and then draw from your own knowledge, from folks around you. Come to places like this. I'm sure there's going to be some good information here later, and don't be afraid to ask.
Thank you so much for your presentation. That was beautiful, informative, and sobering. And I just was curious more about your CSA model. If you're doing a traditional CSA model and selling other types of crops into your community, or is it more the CSSA, which I took a picture of and love that concept? If you are doing a traditional CSA model, is there some possibility with grain, bringing back some infrastructure for processing grain and selling grain and distributing grain locally?
Yeah, excellent question. So we have not done the CSA model direct yet. We're definitely exploring that. We've gotten a couple grants to sell rye direct. And we're actually selling rye into a distillery outside of Glacier National Park. That's been a super fun partnership. And we started with rye because it's something that there's not a lot of, and it's something that we like to grow. Eventually, once we get our enough infrastructure, it's really the infrastructure. The bottleneck is the infrastructure around cleaning and processing and bagging to do that. And frankly, for us as a farm, given our scale and our intent, it's really been more about the stewardship piece first, like taking care of the land, because we've been able to sell things in semi-loads. But that doesn't mean we're not also investigating that. So we're looking for a value-added product marketing and someone that can do the cleaning, too, who wants to actually do the work as well as send the marketing out.
We have lots of exciting ideas. Just finding the people to help us implement it is one of the challenges. Question?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. I was wondering a little more information on your management of your 400 acres of pollinator strips. And then one of your slides out in the philosophies, if I remember this correctly, you said tillage is the art of farming. Did art, is that an acronym for something, or?
Yeah, the conservation strips, we like to call them, are mostly seeded to a mix of pollinator-friendly species, perennial, forbs, and native grasses that support not only pollinators, but that was a primary motivation. Most of those are enrolled in programs that provide us some income for those acres and provided some cost sharing for purchasing the seed and their establishment. Not all, but we try to do that, and there are programs in our country that will pay you an annual rent for acres that are in, they call it a conservation reserve contract, and then there are special ads for being pollinator friendly.
In terms of the management, though, it's mostly been mowing. So it's a trick to get them established. So we opted specifically not to seed more pollinator strips on transition ground that we had this year because it was so dry conditions and we knew it wasn't going to get established well. But once you get them established, then at least for us, a regular mowing has really helped bring up those other broadleaves. So.
And I think the second part of the question, your second question was about tillage and my declaration that that is the true art of farming. And I think tillage and farming as an extension of that gets a lot of bad press. And to me, the alternative practically is poison. So if you're going to farm, grow crops, and manage weeds and competition, at any scale and any sense that I've seen, you're either going to apply poison or you're going to use tillage. And to me, that's a no-brainer. You know, you don't grow food using poison. Who would think to do that? That's ridiculous, right? And so the art of farming is prescribing the right tool at the right time, at the right depth, in the right circumstance. And that's what I meant by that statement, is that's where the art comes in to as being a farmer.
Okay.
One quick one, thanks very much for the talk, that was great. And you just went into it a little bit on the pollinator strips, so I almost sat down, but any other programs from conservation groups? You mentioned the CRP and talked about your pollinator strips, probably your Xerxes, I'm assuming, since I see you're involved in that. But what are some other conservation groups doing for you that's you feel like is really helping you to keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, great question. We're trying to explore and expand a bit more into some of those other conservation groups and bring them in to talk about farming. So I don't have any top of the list names right now other than our USDA, our friends in USDA, and then Xerxes Society. We did form a nonprofit though, and part of what our programming is Agroecological Learning Lab, and so that's going to be our venue to actually bring in more into our land base and say, okay, what about like working with wildlife funders, because there's all these migration corridors that happen, and you know what, migration happens, it's connected to the hydrological systems too, so if we can fix some of the hydrological systems. So that's something that's on the horizon, but great question.
I think last question, Gary?
Well, thanks, Doug and Anna. It's always very interesting to hear your story and to see how your operation has grown over the years. It's very stimulating what you're sharing with us, and we're very appreciative. You mentioned seed a few times and how you have the different arrangements to acquire seed, the use of seed, and what type of seed. But can you maybe talk a little bit, very shortly, about the importance of seed? As I'm not saying anything that you don't already know, but seed is the ultimate to our operations, and especially in organics, and the availability of the seed that will work for us and the seed of the future. That's what I'm kind of interested in. Thank you.
Yeah, seed could be its own whole conference, right? It all starts with the soil, but you don't have much until you put a seed in it. So that's foundational. I guess I'm a little conflicted because I philosophically believe and understand that the best seed would be that is developed as locally as possible, perhaps on the farm itself, grown up through our conditions. And maybe I just we have not gotten good enough at growing, cleaning, roguing, making that seed. I know that to be true, but so far, we've not seen a lot of advantage. In certain species, we can more reasonably grow and save seed from an economic standpoint, but I have yet to see manifest this notion of seed that is adapted to the land and that showing its superiority over more commercial. I really want to believe that, and I want to see it, but I haven't yet.
Well, and having said that, Gary, too, when we do our financial kind of analysis, we have kind of top 5 things. Seed is one of those top 5 things that we're spending money on, unfortunately. So,
Well, I hate for everything to be about economics, but honestly, we can usually buy seed for less than we could sell the crop for. I mean, that's kind of a dirty secret in organics, is a lot of us use non-organic seed. I don't like to say it's because we can buy commercial seed for less than we can sell the crop, but that is true, and at least in the back of our mind, that's a factor that we need to own. So I think it's something we really need to work on as a community. How do we develop our own seed industry? Again, I hate that word, but a community that makes its own seed rather than relying on those outside to bring what might not be the best cultivars for us.
thank you all very much.